We rushed south the second the sun peeked its bright light onto the horizon. Shadows spanned our sleeping alley, but we were packed and moving. My back ached and neck kinked from the awkward sleep. I'm sure everyone felt some sort of way. We plowed through the alley and back onto the desolate roads outside of town. Kyle was a fit of shivers while we jogged through the southern half of Moontown. I had no intentions of staying down here any longer than we had to, but seeing Kyle in such a fuss made my guts churn. I pressed on with TM on my back this time. He wasn't real fond of Donald. In fact, he downright avoided him, so I took him. Kyle needed a break from lugging the little man around. We needed him in the front of the line to navigate us through the outskirts of town. But for a little dude, TM sure did weigh on my already sore back. We'd been on the move for a couple hours tops, and I had to put him down. Nobody was chasing us, so the rush sense had faded. I came to a stop and offloaded the little dude. He looked down at me a second before dismounting, but eventually got the point. "I can carry him for a while," Kyle offered. "The boy needs to walk. It'll do him some good," Donald instructed. Donald's right. There isn't any reason for us to be barreling through here anymore. No one's chasing us. Okay, but we still need to focus on laying low and getting out of here. This is only day 1 of 3, Kyle reminded us. I nodded and we passed on. I nodded and we pressed on. To say the journey was long didn't do it justice. We traipsed out of the heart of Moontown and into the outskirts of town. It was mostly an abandoned sprinkling of ragged shanties. The actual owners of these shanties had no identity. Their shanties had been overrun by beggar conventions. There was no shopping or recreational buildings in this part of town, just desert and a few crappy homes. Whispers filled my ears with each step. The outcasts spoke heavy on the subject of the strangers wandering their way. They didn't ask for handouts, and thank goodness Kyle didn't offer. They eyed us like we were dogs walking upright. Some frumpy bearded fellows waltzed in from their shanties. I veered my posse away from what few structures were sprinkled in these parts. Each one we passed triggered a new onlooker. It didn't take long to notice they were forming a circle. There were at least 10 of these bearded onlookers closing in on us. They weren't armed with anything more than scowls and squints, but their steps weren't friendly.
"That boy!"
One of the bearded outcasts spoke with a rustic finger pointed at TM. "Yeah?" I answered. "What of him?"
"He don't belong to you,"
another bum insisted. "You're not wrong," I agreed. "Does he belong with you?"
"Yes."
The bum was too eager to agree. My gaze flipped over my shoulder, and there was enough fear on TM's face to identify the bum's lie. But I now needed to muster up a way out of this mush. "What's his name?" Kyle asked, beating me to a clever question.
"That's Betty's boy."
A man approached with open arms. TM snuck behind Kyle's leg. His fear remained fresh. "Why is he so scared of you?" Kyle asked. I wish he wouldn't rile these folks up so.
"He's always been timid."
The bum worked his expression around Kyle. "You still haven't given his name," Kyle said.
"I already said he's Bessie's child,"
the man retorted.
"I don't remember his name so distinctively."
"Earlier you said he was Betty's child," Kyle announced. "Now you claim that he's Bessie's child. Which is it, Betty or Bessie?"
"Don't you know the high officer has ordered all children to be registered with the capital upon birth?"
The man aimed to alter the subject. The man's anger was evident. I hadn't worked a way through this surrounding yet, neither. Kyle's fixation on helping TM had blinded him to the shit it backed us into. We remained surrounded by increasingly gnarly-looking hoodlums. The homeless vagabonds had been without for so long that I didn't want to be the one to prohibit them from what they were wanting. I didn't believe TM was their kin. I did believe that he was on their menu that night. My main concern remained getting Kyle and me out of there, but I would have liked to save TM if possible. I steered our team to the left. The widest gap available was in that direction. It wasn't wide enough to pass through, but I aimed to widen it. I reached into my pocket to retrieve Daddy's carver. Most bums' eyes were fixed on Kyle and TM. Donald glanced at me, noticing me take action. I gave Donald a nod and we broke into a sprint. Donald joined my sprint. Kyle caught on and scooped up TM. I yanked the carver from my pocket and wielded it mostly just to spread fear. Donald's shoulder checked our nearest roadblock, knocking him to the ground. Our sudden turn to violence left the remaining outcast baffled. The bum nearest to Kyle made a reach for him. His hand missed Kyle, but still managed a handful of TM's pants. That was the prize he really wanted anyway. I launched back into the circle. Kyle struggled to pull them off the man's grip. Donald stuck to the edge of the circle, holding a place for us. I ran my bony shoulder into the man's sternum. That knocked him good loose. He hadn't seen me charging. I grabbed Kyle by the arm to urge him along. We sped back over to Donald, who was shoving off opposition. Donald had enough girth to handle these scrawny beggars. But it became more evident that they never intended for violence. They had formed an all-bark and no-bite plan, and we had called their bluff. We broke from the collection of outcasts and headed deeper into the outskirts of proper. It was onto the stretch of desert between the main city of Moontown and the avoided side of town. The shanties in the desert strip were even fewer and farther between. Judging by the dust piled within them, I'd say this path felt the frequent wrath of dust nados. This strip of desert had most likely been abandoned for that reason. Nowadays, most saw this desert strip as a border between two towns, even though both areas were part of Moontown. Word was that the syndicate closed the gap between the two sections of town every year or so when they expanded their city. Citizens of Moontown, Maine feared being caught up in the syndicate's web, but took no action to prevent it. While on the outside, the members of Dark Moontown seemed like conquest-hungry wolves. We walked since our earliest waking hour and barely made it a third the way there come night. We hadn't even made it to the forbidden half of Moontown before the stars littered the skies. We'd only packed enough provisions for 3 days of travel. We had to be sure we were headed to the next town by the end of the night. We picked another spot behind a cold shanty to crash. Everybody's feet were begging for mercy, and we were ready to accommodate them. We'd remained on the outskirts of town most of the journey, but being in the desert strip meant shanties were becoming harder to find. But it was nice to have something to sit up against at night. Cold shanty wall held up my back as it still ached. The cold tin wall was like a chunk of ice on my bed spot. We'd also avoided running into any other folks on our journey. Given our most recent interactions with strangers, I was mighty thankful that people avoided this side of town. The rest of the crew set up camp around me. Kyle gave his sleeping bag to TM again, and I gave mine to Kyle. I had to remember to get that boy a sleeping bag. I busted out a can of beans, Kyle shared carrots with TM, and Donald ate some slimy leaves that seemed to slither. It was another stargazing night for Tim and Kyle. I could just sit and watch them in pure wonderment all night, provided they weren't being interrupted by Donald's snoring, that is. I hadn't heard much out of him while we were hitting the trails, but he was more than making up for it now. "Hey, TM," Kyle started up another joke. "How did the young boys keep from getting lost?" TM gazed at Kyle with his eyes. "They didn't leave the house," Kyle announced. TM's face scrunched, and I turned over in the dirt. I laid with my back to Kyle's bad jokes for a good while. Their noises eventually hushed, and I turned back over. Kyle and TM had slipped off into slumberland before I committed to shut-eye myself. Shutting out Donald's snorts was quite the chore, and my back was under attack by hundreds of pointy rocks. Despite these struggles, I still managed a few good hours. Day broke and we woke. It was time for day 2 of our journey. It was TM's kind of morning. Everything was as quiet as a corpse. We packed up and moved on. TM didn't ask to be carried, and no one offered neither. The seriousness of our journey sunk in, as we'd most certainly be running into downtown Moontown sometime today. I still couldn't make out the city on the horizon, but figured it'd be a quarter day's walk until we were off the desert path. From there, we had to stick to the outskirts of Bad Moontown until we slipped past the border. I spoke the plan simple enough. My eyes kept on Kyle. He still had a bad case of the ship. My stomach didn't like it one bit. This was, after all, his plan. And if he weren't any comfortable with it, then how could I be? Donald and TM didn't seem bothered none by the journey ahead of them. I was the leader, so I had to show no fear, but my brother's fear affected me. We pressed on through the dead zone that lay just between the good side of Moontown and the bad side of Moontown. Desert, dirt, and sand as far as my gaze reached. The landscape was as flat as a young girl's chest. No vegetation in sight either. But after a few hours, the bad side of Moontown could be made out in the distance. I stood as the heat wiggled a blur, but there was no mistaking its presence. The ominous beast of our journey had reared its face in our direction, pressed around it, with the blur of the town we'd come from to our backs and the blur of the town to come at our front. Our scuffles through the dirt were only interrupted by the occasional bird call. Some buzzards hovered overhead, probably inspecting us for lunch. I'd say my guess of the quarter's day proved right. We'd finally transferred into the bad part of town. It was clearly different from the rest of Moontown. First and foremost, we were coming up on a collection of buildings, actual buildings. No more shanties or shacks. For a bunch of slave drivers and sex traffickers, they certainly lived the high life. Of all the towns Colin had been to, we'd never seen real structures. It had always been shanties as far as you could imagine. The town was lit with fancy electrical lights. Some even flashed. I wasn't sure if it was intentional or some sort of short, but it looked cool. I tried to spot some folks on the streets, but their streets were bare, and the town was silent. Maybe no one was awake yet. They do always say these crime cities come to life at night. Maybe this side of Moontown was nocturnal. I wanted to stay and gawk, but Kyle didn't so much as flinch. He pressed on as if we were just passing by regular old stuff. Donald stayed and gawked, though. He didn't much mind being left behind. I couldn't allow myself to be separated from Kyle, and Kyle was stuck in his ways. In and out. I'm sure he was thinking that. It was, after all, what we'd agreed on. I took one last glance into the forbidden town and then bid it farewell for the time being. There were some grunts coming from behind us. I turned to address them. TM had planted his butt in the dirt with his bottom lip stuck out like that bottom dresser drawer that just won't shut. I guessed he was done walking. Kyle let loose a frown in the direction of TM. A frown! Now he was pissed. I chose to let him handle this tantrum. They were buds, after all. If it were left up to me, I'd just leave the little stinker behind, provided I was willing to deal with Kyle's earful, which would surely follow. Kyle broke formation and marched towards TM. His frown persisted as he approached with an extended hand. Come on, TM, we can't stop here. We're in the heart of the Syndicate's territory. Time for rest is behind us. Kyle's irritated self was keeping it rather mellow. He grabbed a hold of TM's hand, but TM pulled away and forced his bottom further into the dirt. TM, Kyle started with a firm tone. I'm tired too. I'll carry you, but we have to keep going. Kyle began to wrestle with TM's dead weight. Give it a rest, Donald said. The kid's right for once. Kyle turned to me with a huff. Don't look at me, Kyle, I said. Even if I agreed with you, it'd still be a split decision. Let's just take a quick 20 minutes and press on. Henry, Kyle whined. Just 20 minutes and we'll be on our way, I asserted. Now we had 2 powders. Kyle refused to rest and hovered over us, tapping his foot, while TM sat with the biggest grin on his face, pointed at Kyle. 1 full day's of travel, and these two had already ground their bonds to dust. That's just what we needed. More dust. Unless we experienced some life-altering change, we'd be forced to spend the rest of our years traveling. These two had better figure out how to get along, or I was going to have to step in, and I'd simply evict TM. Kyle'd hate me for it, but he'd forgive me in time, and it might be necessary. For now, I'd just sit and watch the growing skeptical, while it still maintained its comedic value. Say, Henry, Donald said, provided we get out of Moontown, what has the Lord planned for you and Kyle next? Keep traveling. Keep working. Keep living, I responded. In that case, I believe my calling will lead away from you after Moontown, Donald announced. You can leave now, I said. Hiding one body on your behalf is plenty for one lifetime. The Lord Hickafu sends me songs through dreams. You will be in dire need of me through these trials, Donald said. You heard Kyle's plan. We stick to the outskirts and we'll be good, I said. Yeah. But I've heard the Lord's plan, Donald said with a finger pointed over my shoulder. Heads up, I called out. Incoming feline. Henry, Kyle started. We should just leave. No sense in that now, I said. She spotted us. If she's trouble, we'll have to take her out before she can alert anyone else to our presence. Take her out? Kyle shivered. Hey, the woman called out. You desert punks. What do you want? I asked. You all just passing through? She asked. Yep, Kyle answered. We're just leaving. Perfect, she answered. Could you do me a little favor while you pass through? No, I answered. Henry, she just needs some help is all, Kyle said. Yeah, listen to your friend, Henry, she said. You all need to shut up, I declared. Thanks to you, this woman now knows my name, I scolded Kyle. What happened to your previous attitude? In and out. This venture had you reduced to shivers, and now you're entertaining a conversation with this woman. She needs help, Henry, Kyle said. You can't trust every stray we meet, Kyle, I slipped up. We're in the heart of the Syndicate. We can't trust anyone we meet here, period. It takes good people to bring out the good in others, Kyle claimed. I want to be those people. This world needs those people, Henry. This is neither the time nor the place for this lecture. But there isn't good in everybody, Kyle, I started in. Some people are downright rotten. That's not what I believe, Kyle claimed. Just look at Donald. He's a creepy perv, but he still saved me in the mine shaft. Donald is just one man in a world of billions, Kyle, I snapped back. He doesn't prove anything. Plus, Donald added, a man whose faith is as deep as mine cannot be described as a creepy perv, Donald resented. Look, boys, the woman interrupted. All I need you to do is take this rabbit. She reached into her satchel and retrieved a lively fluff ball. She held it by its ears and thrusted it toward us. No, I said. Look, just take the rabbit and release it once you get out of town. She continued to let the rabbit dangle in her careless clutches. No, I said, this time turning my back and taking my lead. Is that kid actually your child? The woman hollered to us, inquiring about TM, I'd imagine. With all the recent abductions, all citizens of Moontown are mandated reporters. She was making a case for blackmail. Report it to who? I asked. The nearest civilization is in the heart of the Syndicate's territory. Even if you felt safe enough going in there to report us, we'd be long gone in the opposite direction by the time you got here. My confidence foiled her plan. I kept my back to the Desert Queen and committed to leave. TM ran to my side and Donald followed close behind. I kept walking and didn't turn my focus anywhere but forwards. I knew I'd hurt Kyle's feelings, but now wasn't the time to address his feelings. I needed to stay stern and keep us moving. I walked with haste, looking to distance ourselves from that woman. Pressed onward into the endless desert, headed in the same direction as before, hoping it was south. But I didn't have the guts to turn and ask Kyle to confirm. Kyle sulked behind me. At least, I hoped he did. All the while, the Desert Queen stepped on back the way she came. Just another theory of mine. I turned to Donald, who confirmed Kyle's presence with a head nod. As for the girl, I assumed the steps that grew quieter belonged to her. I kept our posse moving well into the nighttime hours. The desert turned cool in the moonlight. The shitty side of Moontown was lit up like a birthday cake around dusk. I could hear cheers all the way from where we were. My hunch had proven right. It was a nocturnal town. I didn't let the lights and hollers distract me from our cause. I glanced back at TM and Donald, who watched the light show with mouths that could catch flies. I kept my eyes off of Kyle. It still wasn't time. The sounds emitting from the town seemed joyous. I had expected to hear endless barrage of firing pistols and death calls. Instead, I heard partying call-outs and a rumble of movement. I was convinced I'd created ample distance between the Desert Queen and us, and enough time before my squabble with Kyle. It was time we spoke again. We'd picked out a spot on the outskirts of town, smack dab in the middle of the desert, like there was a whole bunch of real estate to choose from anyway. I staged us behind some large rocks for cover. Hopefully any riffraff passing by wouldn't be looking too hard while we slept. We set up camp for the night, and these distractions were costing us valuable time. We'd have to speed up tomorrow to make up time, but even then I was still feeling this would be more of a 4-day journey. Creeping around the outer roads to reach the border had proven more frustrating than my mind had prepared us for. Day 2, and we'd all had some sort of falling out. I wanted to dump our extra baggage. Donald had confessed that he wanted to part ways. Our little posse, just like all the shitty shanties thrown together in these towns, wasn't built to last. Part of me wanted to flip off this plan and run straight through town. It couldn't be that bad down there. Sounded like a real party, actually. I walked up to Kyle and TM. They were getting along again. They were taking part in their nightly stargazing as if nothing had happened. I was spotted pretty much immediately. I suspect they were waiting for me to come by. After all, Kyle needed my sleeping bag. When would I remember to get that kid a sleeping bag? As I tossed my bag to Kyle, I sat myself beside him. His hazel eyes were already locked onto mine. It was like staring into the eyes of my mother, and I began to wonder who'd be getting the scolding here. Kyle, I started. We can't adopt the entire wasteland. You started this mission dead set on getting in and then out. But the second we run into some desert stray, you start in about stopping to help them. I'm sorry, Henry, Kyle said. Is it so wrong to want to help people? When it puts us in danger, yes, I said. But what about Donald and TM? Kyle asked. We owed Donald, and I might have a soft spot for TM, I admitted. That's not what I'm asking, Kyle clarified. You said it's not okay to help people when it puts us in danger. But what if it puts TM or Donald in danger? I know us only refers to you and me in your mind, Henry. What is this, Kyle? I asked. We're family. Of course I'm going to prioritize your needs over anything. Of course, I know, Kyle sold. What I said wasn't fair or nice. I'm sorry. But this life we lead, Henry, traveling from town to town, working, living, and then traveling some more, it's so dang pointless. Our lives have no meaning, and this world is inundated with negativity. Why can't we try and be a source of positive change in this world? That's all the purpose I ask for. You know we sound just like Mom and Dad. I started off with a scoff. Yeah, and your dad's little doppelganger, Kyle teased. Look who's talking, I announced. You got Mom down to a science. We shared a laugh and made up for the night. Kyle and I never frequented a fight, even when we were young and immature. We were always inseparable and met eye to eye. But on those odd occasions when a disagreement escalated to a full argument, we always knew how to address it. Our arguments always ended in a laugh. We knew once we got the other to hoot, the tensions would all but vaporize. We really were the spitting image of our folks, Kyle taking Mom's role and me taking Daddy's. They didn't argue often either. Most of the time, it was the same age-old argument that Kyle and I had fallen victim to. I reckon witnessing them argue about it and make up is where we learned the trick ourselves. I laid my head beside Kyle's and joined him and TM for their nightly stargazing. The lights from the inner city illuminated the sky in unnatural colors. Of all the nights to stargaze, I had chosen the finest. The lights and luxury of the city before us seemed too lavish to be soiled by misconduct. The laughter and cheers coming from within its limits also seemed too genuine to be fouled. After all, there are more rumors surrounding this side of town than the private parts of a prostitute. Couldn't help but wonder if the rich had just made it all up so they'd be left the hell alone. Sounds like something I'd do. What did the big city mouse say to the little city mouse? Kyle asked. What? I bit. I live in the big cheese, Kyle giggled. TM joined Kyle for a giggle. I shook my head and turned over in disgust. All right, come out of there, an unfamiliar voice called out. I patted the air with my hand and motioned for my posse to lay low while I stood to address the situation. Once I could see over the rock, I locked eyes with the boulder of a man standing on the other side of it. He stood with his back to the city lights, and their glare made it hard for me to spot his details. He was a frumpy graybeard with dusty overalls and gloves. Despite his signs of age, his forearms looked ready to crush a boulder. His expression didn't give off cause for worry, but his bossy tones sure did. Can I help you, sir? I asked. Are we squatting on your property? No, the man answered. I've come for my rabbit. The man extended his hand toward me. We haven't got your rabbit, sir, I answered. I don't mean you any harm, boy, the man announced, but I will need my rabbit back. I assure you, sir, I said, we don't have your rabbit, but I suspect I know who does. Yeah, I already know the story,
the man interrupted. I nabbed Lola in the desert, and she told me she handed Benjamin over to some desert punks a few miles up the road. Here I am, traveling a few miles up the road, and fancy what I run into. Some desert punks. Now either Lola or you, boy, are jerking me around, and I tend to get violent when I'm jerked.
The rabbit ran away, Kyle piped in. I turned him a quick scowl.
That was really the wrong answer, boy.
The man grew closer, knuckles popping and jaw snarling.
Either pay up in cash or pain.
We'll pay, I interjected. How much?
$138,
the man announced. I shivered as I reached into my wallet packed of $14. I pulled it from my pocket and counted with confidence, trying to figure a way to pay this man. Say, Kyle, I turned back to my brother. How much money you got? $14, same as you, Henry, Kyle said. Donald, I called out. What have you got?
28 cents, Donald groaned. I donated the other 14 to Moontown's House of Worship. Their reverend was riveting. Come on, kids. $28.28 won't even cover the cost to replace Benjamin. I'm losing my patience.
Benjamin? Kyle asked, his innocence acting as a shield against this man's festering rage. What's so special about that rabbit, sir?
Benjamin is a drug mule. There is moon dust in that pouch of his collar, and he was to be delivered to a rather prestigious client of mine.
The man dropped his shoulders when faced with Kyle's demeanor. So moon dust is some sort of drug? Kyle asked.
Only the most sought-after drug amongst them hoity-toity folks up in the capital,
the man said. I've always dreamt of going to the capital, Kyle gloated. Have you ever been, sir?
No, the man scoffed. Fat chance I'll ever get there.
The man paused to rub his chin a minute.
Say, I can tell you are some good kids who might just have been mixed up in some shit here, so maybe you could come back to me in town and just work off your debt.
We looked amongst each other. This man wasn't too hateful, but was determined to get what he was owed. There was no hiding that no one wanted to follow this man into the dark side of Moontown. But how else would we get out of this slop? Even if all three of us attacked at once, I wasn't convinced we'd take this beast down. Hostility would only do us good if I could assure our success. Wait, Kyle hollered. Benjamin didn't have a collar.
What are you trying to play at, kid?
The man stepped up to Kyle. No, honest, Kyle shivered. I have a photographic memory. That rabbit did not have a collar.
Lola is a moon dust junkie, the man said, and he went back rubbing his chin. Say, kid, turn around, the man ordered. Kyle obliged. Kept my hawk eyes locked onto the man. I didn't like any of the thoughts I had for what he might be planning. How many lights are on the tower, third from the town's entrance gate? The man asked.
Kyle's back was turned against the town. I now understood why the man had him turn around. Kyle's memory was good, but he would have had to have seen the tower in order to remember it. From what I'd seen, Kyle had been too busy rushing past the town to pay any attention to it. Now, in this desperate moment, I certainly wish he had. There are 9 total lights on that tower, Kyle answered. They're arranged in 3 rows of 3, although 2 of them are burnt out. Top right bulb and bottom middle bulb.
Well, I'll be damned, kid.
The man spoke between glances back to the town.
Good thing I nabbed Lola after all. Should have known that bitch was only after the moon dust. She probably ate Benjamin, too. The man moped. People call me Tortoise. Delivering drugs by rabbit is my calling card.
He extended his hand to Kyle. Like the story of the tortoise and the hare, Kyle chimed in, meeting the man's handshake.
Exactly. It was my son's favorite.
The man moped more. Did something happen to your son? Kyle asked.
I'm not entirely sure, he answered. He wasn't unlike you, and he loathed me because of my work. He ran off at 15, and I'd never seen him since. Anyway, I've said enough. You kids need to be on your way. Few people around here are as nice as me. 15 years of life may make you an adult by law, but as someone who's raised a child, I must say it does not make you an adult mentally. Most people in Moontown would share my views on your youth, and your being young will get you through some problems around here, but it also lands you an entirely different pot of problems, too.
The man turned to take his leave. Thank you, Mr. Tortoise, Kyle called out Tortoise's back with a wave. Tortoise waved back as he disappeared against the shine of the city lights.